Hi everybody again. I apologize for not being in class again today. So I wanted just for a few minutes to discuss one little topic that we would have not gotten to in the halachas of Chanukah. The truth is, first, if you take a look at the first halacha, it's just an interesting halacha you've all probably heard of. The main idea, we usually learn it before Pesach or on Purim. We have the main halacha of what we call Sholim V'Darshan. Sholim Behilchos Pesach Kodem LePesach Shloshim Yom. That we have this idea that we typically start learning the halachos of Pesach 30 days before Pesach, which happens to be Purim. Often the minhag at the Purim Suda is to learn a little bit of Hilchos Pesach. So we have this idea that 30 days before Pesach we start learning Hilchos Pesach. The Mishnah Berurah over here discusses a machlokas as to whether or not we only say this by Pesach or do we say it by other Yom Tovim as well. But first of all, where does he get this, the Shulchan Aruch get this idea from? Shaharei Moshe Omeid BePesach Rishon, right? It was the first Pesach in the Midbar. U'ma'ashirin al kol hilchos Pesach Sheni. And on that day is when Moshe Rabbeinu taught us all the laws of Pesach Sheni for those who were Tamei and couldn't partake in Pesach Rishon. V'hu adin b'shar yomim tov. So that's the idea, that's the reason why, because we see Moshe already 30 days before was discussing the laws of Pesach Sheni. Says the Mishnah Berurah, v'hu adin b'shar yomim tovim. On other Yom Tovim too, Nami Dorshin Kodem L'chein Shloshim Yom B'Hilchosayim. We also spend 30 days before the other Yom Tovim, and that's why I thought it would be a good idea, even though it's only I guess 25 days or so, 24 days till Chanukah. Based on this idea, it's appropriate today, at the very latest, to already start thinking about the laws of Chanukah. However, he does quote, just so that we know this halacha, V'ayim Bebeir Hagra, the Vilna Gaon says, Shadaito de Ba'atzeres, which is Shavuos, Sagi Miyom Echad B'Sivan. It's enough to start learning on the first day of Sivan. There happens to be not too many halachos for Shavuos, so it's enough for a few days. He also says, quotes, V'yeshomim dehachiv shloshim yom, hu rak b'Pesach mishum deyesh behen halachos rabos. So he quotes from some achronim that this whole halacha only applies on Pesach because there's a lot to learn, right? The proof from the Torah was from Pesach, and Hilchos Pesach has tons of halachos, as he quotes, Kagon Tachinas, Chitim, by grinding up the wheat for matzah, V'afiyas hamatzos, and baking the matzahs, V'hagalos kelim, and kashering kelim, Ubir chametz, and checking and getting rid of chametz, and so on. She'ilu im ein osin osan kehilchosayim, that if a person would not do this kodem Pesach, leis lehu takanu b'Pesach, if you don't start learning that stuff before Pesach, you're going to be in trouble. There's too much to accomplish on Pesach itself. Masha ein kain b'shar. That's not a good one. Let's get rid of that. Masha ein kain b'shar yom tovim. By other yom tovim, it's different. Right? Dai bazeh yomim kodem, be'ezeh yomim kodem. And it's enough for a couple of days before. Okay? And with that we'll read, so this is a big machlokas, whether or not this idea of studying the laws 30 days before Pesach applies to all yomim tovim, or perhaps just to Pesach. Again, the makor being for Moshe Rabbeinu. But nevertheless, for today, we will assume that it applies on some rabbinic level to Chanukah. And we will try to spend a few minutes to learn a halacha about Chanukah. Again, one that specifically applies to women. The main conversation we will have in class, which we're not going to touch on now, is the issue of woman's obligation in lighting her own menorah, or lighting the menorah in some form or fashion, to which there's a very big conversation, and we're going to leave that for now. But I just wanted to point out one halacha here as it applies to women. And the Shulchan Aruch says in Siman Tafresh Ayin, which is the first halacha for Hilchos Chanukah, up here on the top, he says, we'll just read the Shulchan Aruch quickly. B'chafei b'Kislev matchilin shmonos yimei Chanukah. On the 25th of Kislev we start Chanukah. V'asurin b'hesped u'b'tainis, and it's forbidden to have any eulogies, and it's forbidden to fast. Avumutar b'asiyas malacha, but you're allowed to do malacha. You are allowed to do all malacha on Chanukah. There's no issue of doing malacha on Chanukah. It's not a yontif where malacha is forbidden. However, he writes, "V'nohagin shahanashim sholasos malacha ba'od shahaneros dolkos." I apologize that word is a little bit cut off there, but the halacha is, Shulchan Aruch says that there's a minhag, a strong minhag, that women do not do malacha so long as the candles are burning. We'll soon see what that means. V'yesh mi she'omar she'ein lahakel aleihem, which is a strange language that the Shulchan Aruch says, and there are those who say that we really should not be lenient about this, meaning that it's a little bit more than a minhag, or perhaps that this minhag is so prevalent that it was really something that we should not be lenient, and we should really encourage women to follow this minhag. So we see this idea that women should, again, during the time that the candles are lit, as we will define it now, there is this minhag that women should not do any molacha, and we will have to define what that molacha is as well. If we take a look at the Mishnah Brura, I'm going to try to blow this up for us so that we could see it a little bit better. How do I zoom in? Hang on there with me for a second. Here, zoom, just so that you could see the words of the Mishnah Brura down here. So the Mishnah Brura says over here is as follows. In Sifkatan Gimel, Hanashim dafka nashim lefi shenasa nes al yedehem. As we know, we've learned this earlier in the year, that the nes of Chanukah is attributed to the women, to Yehudis, for her actions, and therefore this halacha specifically applies to women, that somehow abstaining from halacha during this time is special for women. And then he writes in the Mishnah Brura, "V'yesh makom shegam anashim machmirim bazeh." There are some places, I'm not really aware of any places like that today, but he says there may be some places as well where men have this this minhag as well. So we really have two questions. Again, question number one is, what does it mean ba'od shahaneros dolkin? For how long is this minhag? And number two is, what types of malacha are, I'll use the word forbidden, although again this is a little loosely because it is a custom, but this does seem to be a custom that is something that should be taken very seriously. So if we look, there's a very wonderful sefer by the name of Piskei Tshuvos, which is really a compilation of more current poskim after the Mishnah Brura, but it is written in the order of the Mishnah Brura and quotes the Mishnah Brura and the Shulchan Aruch, in detail. So here he has this conversation, as it says, "Be'inyan iser asiyas malacha lanashim keshahaneros dolkim," and this is our issue. And he quotes, "Nohagos hanashim shalolasos malacha ba'od shahaneros dolkos." Right, this is our divrei hamaschil, if you will, from the words of the Shulchan Aruch. So he says, what does that mean? Ba'od shahaneros dolkos, hakavana shir hazman shechayev lidluk me'ikar hadin. It doesn't mean the entire time that the candles are lit there's this minhag not to do malacha. Only what it means is the amount of time that the candles must be lit from. Again, he's going to tell you he gets this from a Mishnah Brura, which I didn't read to you because it's a little bit clearer here. V'hu chatzi shah. Right, as we may hopefully all know, that the minimum requirement for having the candles burn is a half an hour, and therefore that's the amount of time that we're talking about. The first 30 minutes while the candles are burning, that's when this minhag applies. Aval la'achar chatzi shah ein iser lasos malacha af shehaneros adayin dolkos. Right, but after that first half hour, it doesn't make a difference. They could be burning for another 2 hours, and the minhag would not apply at that point. You could go ahead and do malacha. Kain lamad ha-Mishnah Brura, v'hu al pi hatam shehevi ha-Mishnah Brura, and this is based on the following reasoning. What is the reason why we have this malacha, this isser malacha? She'isser malacha l'nashim hu mishum heker. It's some kind of recognizable breaker. Shelo yavo lehishtamesh v'lehanos me'or neros Chanukah. to make sure that we don't make use of this nair, right? We know there is an isser. Again, we haven't discussed that today, but there is an isser to use or to benefit from the light. This is one of the main differences between Neiros Chanukah and Neiros Shabbos, that on Shabbos you're supposed to benefit from it, on Chanukah you're not allowed to benefit. So as a hecker, to remind us not to benefit from it, we have this isser Melacha. So therefore, after 30 minutes, after 30 minutes, technically speaking, you would be allowed to benefit from the light of the menorah, because again, it's just during the ikr time of the mitzvah. So after that, after those 30 minutes are up, it's no longer the main part of the mitzvah anymore, and you would be allowed to get benefit from it. Hence, there would be no need for the Isser Melacha. So that's the first reason that it's tied in. This Isser Melacha is tied in to be a recognizable marker, if you will, to separate from the Ikr mitzvah of the first 30 minutes of that Chiyuv HaMitzvah. However, he quotes others who disagree and say that the reason is different. There's another reason why women don't do Melacha. That this was Yontif of Chanukah was established as a real Yontif of Halal and thanks to Hashem. And therefore, to set this up properly, which is a yontif that was done through the hands of women, they shouldn't do malacha, because that's part of making it into a yontif for them, a yontif of halal v'hodah. And he says, according to this, Achronim say, Lefitam zeh iser malacha hu kol zman shemitzuyim neiros Chanukah dukim. It's going to apply all the time that the lights of the menorah are lit. Behind you ad chatzos halayla, which is really, I guess, up until chatzos, because that would be the later normal time. Again, if it was later, in some weird circumstance, then I guess it would keep on applying past that. But let's just assume at least until chatzos. However, he does say, and this is important for us, v'im ki minhag hapashut hu, our minhag, turning to the next page, kisvara harishona. Our minhag is like the first one, lahatir asiyas malacha la'achar chatzi shah, right? So therefore, for us, everyone listening, this halacha of refraining from malacha should be just during that 30 minutes. We do not have to worry about this second opinion. He says, however, mikol makom isra shanagu lahachmir, b'makom shanagu lahachmir, ein lahakil laham. If there is a place today that really has this minhag to apply more than 30 minutes, then they shouldn't be lenient. But if this is not your minhag, or you don't know what your minhag is, then you can stick with the first opinion that it's just the first 30 minutes. So we've answered the first question, that the Isser is just for the first 30 minutes, at least according to the psak of the Mishnah Berurah, which seems to be the minhag ha'olam today. What about question number 2? What types of malacha are forbidden? So here, the Piskei Teshuvos quotes, Umikol makom, forgetting about this whole thing, nevertheless you should know, ki ein klal isra asiyas malacha b'dvarim hamutarim b'yontif kagom bishul v'afiyah v'hachanas shar tzarchei suda. Right, the isra we're talking about is not things that you can't do, meaning things that you can do on yontif. I apologize. Yontif, you're allowed to cook, you're allowed to bake, and so on. The things to prepare for the meal, you're allowed to do that on Yontif. So clearly that's not what we're talking about. You're allowed to cook during this time of the first 30 minutes. There's some people who think that that's not allowed, but according to most poskim, that is totally permissible. The only issue is v'yesh omrim shelo asru ella. Well, actually, before we read that, meaning that the way whatever would be forbidden permitted on Yontif would be permitted here, right? So you're allowed to cook. And there's another guideline. V'yesh omrim shelo asru ela malachos tfir v'sriga kibus v'giyut. Some say the only malachos that are forbidden here are to do the laundry, to sew, to do things like that, to press things. About sharon yani habayis kashtifa v'kibut habayis, but other things of taking care of the house, cleaning up, cooking, baking are not forbidden. So again, just to conclude, it would seem that even though there's some difference of opinion, according to pretty much all the poskim, cooking is permitted during this time, unless, again, if you have some minhag that is not permitted, you should discuss with your Rav to make sure that minhag is appropriate. But other than that, It would just be these couple of things like laundry and sewing and things like this, which would be the things we should refrain from. Have a great day.